So, hey everyone, this is the first of three. I told y'all we were having surprises, and this is the first of three surprises, and I'm calling this the 320 Life Conversations. And if you just happen to be finding me on YouTube, we are talking about my newest Bible study, the 320 Life, the life you always wanted and wondered how to have. This is not a Bible study video. I am having a conversation with a dear friend of mine. I'm going to introduce her in just a second, and we're going to get into the topic. But if you find anything with this logo on it, there'll be Bible study teachings, but these are conversations that we are having to do with the three principles taught in the book. This week's principle is, yes, cultivates trust in God. And in your study this week, you had all kinds of examples of saying yes to God, the importance of saying yes to God. The biggest yes, Sherri, being, this is Sherri Stokes, my friend.
McAteer.
Oh, that's right, McAteer. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're going to be Sherri Stokes forever.
I know. I was Stokes a long time.
Yes, you were. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into her story in just a minute. But yes to God is the biggest yes ever, is to say yes to God through salvation. Mm-hmm. And so we lay that out. But then we talk about the depth that yes to God takes us in our relationship with Christ through obedience. And Sherri, it cultivates trust in God. So we dug into that. Your teaching this week also dealt with just hammering that in and the benefits of yes to God. And hopefully you've done your teaching video. If you haven't, that's fine. I'm not going to give you any spoiler alerts. I'm not giving you all the answers, but go back and watch the teaching, or watch this first and then go back and watch the teaching. It's flexible. That's the beauty of the study, is its flexibility. But the conversations, 320 conversations idea, just, I know it was from the Lord. I wanted just something else to go with the study. And I woke up, and this was what the Lord had laid on my heart, is to talk to three people about the principles. And I had the first person, and I'm not going to tell you who they are because that's week 3 and 4, but I had the first person come straight to my head for the second week. And then the third person came straight to my head, and then Sherri came straight to my head. And Sherri and I have collaborated in ministry before. In my third book, Hidden Potential, Revealing What God Can Do Through You, she shared her story, and I think you can find that on Proverbs 31 Ministries website. I believe all my teachings are on Proverbs 31 Ministries website there. And then also there's teachings for that on YouTube. I'll put those links in the descriptions. I'm not real savvy on all this tech stuff,
You're
Sherri,
more savvy than
so
I.
I'm going to figure it out as we go along. So this is unedited, uncut. We are just doing a first take and trusting God to lead and cultivate this conversation. So Sherri and I have known one another. We have been conversing for about an hour prior to this, catching up with one another. We live in the same town, but we don't see one another very often. And I was trying to think, and we didn't even talk about this, how long have we known each other? I remember when y'all adopted Heather. So how old is Heather?
Heather is 29.
Okay, so it has to be...
Well, Maddie and Griffin are the same age, so it was, and they're 22, so
Right.
it was before then.
Right.
I think when we went to church together, Heather might have been like 4 years old.
Okay.
So probably 25 years at least.
Okay,
Yeah.
at least 25
Mhm.
years. And interestingly enough, we have been in two different churches together. And so funny because neither one of us are church hoppers.
No.
But it just happens to be, we ended up moving, different life situations, and ended up being at the same church, two different churches at different times in our lives. But one of the things that I always loved and admired about you, Sherri, and what I believe why God brought me to you for this conversation, is the end result of the yes, cultivating trust in God, the no, inviting revelation from God, is the maybe that freedom welcomes with God. And I address in the book just the beauty of being free in Christ and the outpouring of love and service to other people based on this cyclical of yes to God and no to self. And I always noticed that about you and Harry, your then husband Harry. You served with joy. I mean, if it needed to be done, you were in it. You were joyful. You were a woman and a husband. You were a team. Y'all both served in church. You brought your kids to church. If I just remember that about you. And even with the second church that we were in, y'all jumped right in. You started serving. You served your community. It wasn't just, and that's what I love too, is that you had that freedom and that love for the church, but outside the church walls, you loved people involved in your community hugely. So I knew that you had a deep relationship with God. You and I were in Bible study together. We filled blanks together all those years and served in the nurseries together, or like I said,
Women's ministry.
Women's ministry.
When you started serving in the women's ministry,
right.
I was on the team.
That's
I didn't think about that till just right now.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
So we served, man.
I remember going to like all the Dollar Trees to get lipstick holders for party favors one time. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
For a big event we had.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That seems like
It was
ages
way back.
ago.
Maddie was a baby, so that
Yeah.
was 21 years ago. Maybe.
Okay, so we have a depth of history. A depth of history. But let's see, what year was it that tragedy struck your house?
2013.
2013. We had been at our second church that we were together for a short time when your world was rocked. And something that I've shared with you before is that you experienced one of my greatest fears. And I've shared this in numerous places, but my biggest fear was that I would be a young widow. And it wasn't like anything had ever, my husband didn't do anything dangerous in his line of work, but I just always feared, and I don't really even know where that fear came from, other than the enemy. But I don't know how that generated in my head. But I remember calling a mutual friend and saying to the mutual friend, hey, I missed y'all at the business meeting tonight. I wanted to talk to our mutual friend, Christy. I wanted to talk to John about some of the things that they said in the business meeting, because he was very active in the church and all. And I said, I missed y'all tonight. And said, in fact, I missed y'all this morning, I said to Christy. And there was a silence on the phone. And she said, Harry died. She didn't have to say who. I knew it. And I said, what happened? I thought it was his heart, because he had had some health issues. And she went on to tell me what happened. Will you kind of fill in the blank as much as you can and as much as you want to, and then we're going to move on.
Yes, so you are right. I like to say, if you looked up happy family in the dictionary, you'd see our picture.
Oh, and Harry bought matching outfits for you and the girls. I mean, he just adored his family.
He did. He loved us so well.
Yes.
So we had been married 28 years in August of 2013. We had 3 girls, 2 adopted, 1 biological, and we were involved PTA, school. He ran a successful business. We were involved in our church. Sunset Slush. We ran 2 businesses, and we were involved. He was involved in the community, an elected official, and so I like to say we went to bed on Saturday night, August 17th, 2013, a happy family. And I woke up on Sunday morning, it was a Sunday, August 18th, 2013, and I realized that morning that he had taken his life in the night. And, you know, it's funny, I never had the fear of losing my husband. It never really dawned on me to be afraid of that. And there was no warning, there was no depression, there was no warning. If you asked me if I ever thought Harry would be one to do that, I would have said 1,000% no. And everybody who knew him, I think, would have said no.
Absolutely.
Everybody was shocked, but nobody was more shocked than me.
Well, and the thing about it is our social media was not that prevalent then, but you know how we see people, the reality of things is not what it's perceived on social media. That would be the exact opposite of what I would say your family was. the backside of the story of your family was what we saw out in the public. It was not.
It's what I saw, and I lived there. We loved our girls. We had a great marriage. We loved each other. You know, we were comfortable. I mean, as far as I knew, everything was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you wake up and
I wake up and I realized he had taken his life, and then after his funeral and after he died, I began to learn some things that gave me a little more information as to why, and I don't know what you want me to elaborate on. Or
you
what
don't
I'll
have to
let you-
elaborate on
Okay.
anything, but there were more things that began to unravel
Right.
that shocked you, and that leads me to why I know you were the one to come here to do this first conversation with me, because we have learned this week, and you and I both know, yes to God does cultivate that trust in God. And by the way, Sherri's a licensed counselor, which gives this conversation to me even more depth and weight and authority, besides the fact that she's a woman who loves the Lord, has always loved the Lord, has always served the Lord, loves her family. Her priorities have always been in order, and I've always looked at her as a hero to me, just like, wow, she's got this together. No one would ever have
There are some
expected.
behind the scenes that don't match up to that. Let me just say that.
Okay. We didn't turn the camera on before, so.
Yeah.
But so Sherri, yes, cultivates trust in God. You're going along in life, and you nurture that relationship with Christ through your obedience. And I'm speaking to anyone out there, okay? And we nurture our relationship with Christ through obedience. We start feeling really good, not about ourselves, because we realize who we are in regards to God. And I call it like this, I call my yeses to God a secret, because it's me and God. He's telling me what to do. And in my heart, there's a delight that I have delighted my Father. And I don't care if anybody knows what I did. It doesn't matter anymore. Before I learned these principles, the pride part of me wanted, hey, a thank you. Maybe not a trophy, but a thank you would be nice. Now, I don't want any acknowledgement about anything that I do, truthfully. So, you're going along, speak to the person. Well, first speak about your situation. You were that girl. You were that lady. How was your trust in God after it looks like He pulled the rug out from under your feet? What happened to your trust in God?
Honestly, I never didn't trust Him, but I had a lot of questions.
Okay.
Like, I had grown up in church. My foundation was solid. I guess it was time for me to truly lean on the things that I had said I believed all my life. Like, I think I had leaned on them some, but not to this magnitude. Like, everything about my life when I woke up that morning was different. I felt like, okay, everything about my life is different. And I had a million questions, but I never didn't trust Him. And I think it's because I knew Him and had believed it all my life. But believing it and acting on it are different.
So you had your foundation, which speaks immensely to the fact that we need to be in the Word. We need to be in surrender to God through that yes, because that builds. In one of my books, I call it my faith bank, because basically what we do when we're yesing to God is we're putting deposits in the faith bank, so that when something like this happens, you start making those withdrawals. Okay, God, I don't
and
get
that's
this,
what I say.
but I get you.
Yes, it was very natural for me to lean on Him and lean on my faith in Him, because I had believed it all my life, and I had spent time getting to know Him. And when I share my story, I always encourage people, get to know Him now. Get to know Him now. Spend time in His Word. Spend time in prayer. Commune with Him. Be with His people. Get to know everything you can get to know about God now, because the Bible says in this world you will have trouble.
If you're taking notes,
John 16:33, I
Take
think.
John 16:33 down and write down that phrase, get to know him now.
Get to know him now.
Mm-hmm.
Because he promised we are going to have trouble. And there's Isaiah, I think 43:2-3. It's the verse that says, when you go through rivers of difficulty,
Right.
when you go through fires of oppression, you will not be overtaken, you will not be burned. That verse doesn't say someday if you happen to.
Mm-hmm.
It says,
and you might.
yeah, it
when.
says when. So
Right.
so God has told us from day one, you're going to have trouble
Mm-hmm.
in this world. So I really encourage people, get to know him before the trouble. Because
Mm-hmm.
then, if you truly know him and trust him,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be a very natural thing for you to lean on that. And it was for me. But I only thought I trusted him then. And I did trust him, but it's so different now.
Yeah, it's like the title of the book is, the subtitle of the book is The Life You Always Wanted and Wondered How to Have. You had the life you always wanted. And I shared in the teaching the first week is one thing that I'm learning in my life right now is I had the life I've always wanted, but with each season of opportunity to trust God in uncertain moments, I get led to a new life that I always wanted and wondered how to have.
Mm-hmm.
There's seasons that we are taken through that we develop more and more and deeper roots, as Paul talks about, and get the depth of his love for us, his provision for us, his grace for us. Okay, so when I was listening to you say get to know him now, when my mother was sick, they were telling us make sure you give her her medicine. And my mother would say, I don't need that. I'm not hurting right now. And we would say, Mama, the doctors really want you to stay ahead of the pain. Ahead of the pain. So a practical example of every day right now living, this is it. We need to stay ahead of what might, or more than likely will come in some form or fashion, whether it's to you or you're caught up in it because you're part of something else. That happens. So you develop that trust. That trust maintained you, held you strong to the point where you are, God just has redeemed everything the locust ate. It's beauty from ashes, as we were talking prior to going on video. What did you do with the questions? Do you still have questions for God? And what do you do with the unanswered questions? Because everyone here, including myself, have questions. It's like, why did you let that happen? If you're sovereign, and I trust that you're sovereign, I'd really like you to be sovereign over other people's lives and the hard part, but don't bring me any hard part. Now, where did you find that? And how do you live with the questions?
When there is a suicide, especially if the person didn't have depression or you never had an inkling, there are a million questions, and I can't get the answers. And I used to say, I'll get them when I get to heaven, but since then I've decided I'm not going to care. When I get to heaven, I'm really not going to care. I'm not going to need or want the answers.
No, and we're not going to run to Eve either. And
No, we're going to run to Jesus, and we're going to worship, and we're going to be
Absolutely.
reunited with people that we loved, but I'm not going to care. So basically, I'll never have the answers. I will never know fully why, or there's a million questions. Why did God allow this to happen? We truly were a good family. Harry was a good man, a good father, a good husband, a good provider. Why did this horrible thing happen to us? I don't think you can help but ask that. So I did ask, and I still wonder sometimes. But every client that comes and sits in my office has those same questions. Why would God allow this to happen to a good person? Why does God allow these things? And Wendy, that's the $1 million question, and we can't answer it. We can answer it. But what I can answer is he knows what he's doing. He's sovereign. Nothing happens without his permission. He filters everything. Could he have kept Harry from doing that? Absolutely, he could have. But he allowed it. And I don't even fully know why he allowed it. And I may not ever know. But what I know is he is trustworthy, and that he has provided for my girls and me, and he has, we never didn't pay our bills. We never didn't have groceries. He has provided, and he's trustworthy. And I'm reading a book right now, and one of the things that it says is you can't have unshakable faith if it's never shaken.
Ooh. Wow.
And so I think that to answer the whys, I don't know. And I've said I've had plenty of pity parties, and I've had plenty of why me moments, but somewhere in there God spoke to me and said, I shifted that from why me to why not me. I'm not the only person who's ever had a tragedy, so why not me? And I also shifted it, instead of saying why me, why me, why me, make this count, Lord. What is it that you have in this for me and for other people? And I mean, I'm not some spiritual superhero. It's just at some point I came to terms with the fact that there would be questions I would never have answers to. And I'll be honest, there's a freedom when you get to the point that you're not going to get the answers. There is a freedom in saying, okay, I'm going to let this go now because I'm not going to get the answers. In this lifetime, I'm not going to get the answers.
Because the unanswered questions will then serve as a chain that keeps you fastened to that pain and keeps you fastened to that moment and never move on for what God has for you later. And so what you don't know, I've said Sherri is a Christian counselor now, and Harry's been gone how many years?
This August will be 10 years.
10 years. In 10 years, well, really, when did you start school?
So that's a really cool story. So he died on August 13th. Gosh, I'm getting that backwards.
18th.
August 18th, 2013. Sometimes I get the year and the day, So he died on August 18th, 2013. On August 18th, 2014, that was my first day of class.
Right. I remember you posting that.
Right. So 1 year to the day, on the 1 year anniversary of Harry's death, I began my classes at Liberty University online to study counseling, because what happened was I was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, and I had not worked in 20 years, so I knew that I could get a job and do a good job, but I knew that I looked horrible on paper. And I was like, what am I going to do? I needed an income for my family. And so I started to pray, and Lord, what is it? What can I do? What would you have me do? And he had been so faithful to me, even immediately, he had been faithful to me. And I knew he was present and faithful, and I was like, how can I share your faithfulness? What can I do? So I prayed and prayed and prayed, and the Lord just directed me to go back to school and get my master's degree and become a counselor.
Something you had never considered, thought about, dreamed about.
No, I would have been a stay-at-home mom forever, probably.
Yeah.
So I started researching and landed at Liberty. It was an online program. I could do it online. So I graduated from college in 1986. So this was almost 30 years later. I started the application, and I had everything I needed to get into the counseling program. You had to have a certain number of psychology and sociology. The only reason I had them is because, well, now I know it's not the only reason, but because I loved the sociology professor so much, I took a sociology class for an elective in 1984. 85.
He went before you.
Yes, he was orchestrating. He was weaving.
Oh, yeah.
So I started my studies on the 1 year anniversary of Harry's death. So it took me 3 years. Do you know that on August 18th, 2017, I walked out of my internship for the very last time, completing everything that I had to do. It wasn't the end of my semester. It wasn't my graduation date. But that day, I completed all my work, everything I had to do to earn that degree. So God redeemed that date for me, because it will always be a very hard day. But now I know it's the day he began something new and finished it on the same date on the calendar. So, so 3 years later, I finished, and I had actually walked in graduation the May before I finished. My degree was complete. I think my diploma is dated September of 2017.
Well, you said a few minutes ago you're not a Christian superhero, but somebody on the other side of the camera is probably thinking that. they're thinking, well, whoopee-doo, good for you. You are a Christian superhero. But I know you. You're a hero to me because of all that you've been through. I watched you. But all glory goes to God.
Mm-hmm.
And you give him glory and testimony and testify all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, as we wrap this up, speak from a counselor's heart to the woman or man who might be watching this that goes, you know, I sowed all my seeds, and I have spent years serving in the church. I have been poured out in the community, and I can't trust God right now. Is that normal? Something's wrong with me. What do you say to that person that would come in here and sit right down on this couch
Yeah,
and say
and
that?
I say it all the time, and it's hard. It's hard to trust when you feel like everything is going wrong, and I don't know why, but hard things always seem to come in piles. You know, after Harry died, I had one surgery that had complications, and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had that as a widow. I had to go through that by myself, and you know, just hard thing after hard thing after hard thing. And I mean, to be honest, it's hard in our flesh to trust. But I tell you, the day Harry died, that night, my younger two girls still lived at home, and that night we crawled in bed. They crawled in bed with me. My oldest was not living at home. She was in an apartment. But the younger two, we slept together for months, which was fine with me. They needed me. I needed them. So we crawled into bed that night, and as I laid down, I knew I wasn't going to sleep. It was the most chaotic, horrible day of my life, more horrible than I could ever imagine. But we got in bed that night, and 2 Bible verses popped in my mind. And I always like to give an ad for scripture memory. If I had not memorized those verses at some point in my life, they would not have popped in my mind. But one of them was, when I am afraid, I will trust in you, Psalm 56:3. And the second one was Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So, and there are specific things God did that day to let me know he was with me. But for the people who don't trust, it's not about our ability to trust. It's about who we trust. And he is able.
Write that down. That's another good one.
Yeah. So it wasn't about, in those moments, I don't think we have the ability to fully trust. I really don't. But he is trustworthy. And, you know, and sometimes we just have to choose to show trust even if we don't feel it. I'm a big person about feelings. Feelings are liars. Our feelings will lie to us. I don't always feel God's presence in my life. I don't always feel it. You know those times when you do, and it's so, like, it's amazing. And
you don't want to leave that mountain of transfiguration.
And it might feel different to different people. It might feel like electric current. I don't know what it feels like for you, but when you feel that, it is amazing, and you don't want it to leave, and you're just like, oh, please, don't let this go away. But that's not the everyday.
No.
I don't feel his presence every day, but what do I know? I know he's with me. I know he's with me. So it's about leaning on what you know. I didn't maybe feel like trusting him. I felt like my world was shattered. My husband of 28 years was gone. I had 3 kids to raise by myself. I had a million doubts and a million questions. But Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when I am afraid, I will trust in you. That was the first things that I thought. And so I thought, you know what? You know what I thought, honestly? I have to put my money where my mouth is. That's really what I thought. People know me. They know I'm a believer. I love Jesus. I know about Jesus. I trust Jesus. And I had been through some hard things.
Yeah.
Nothing to this magnitude. But he had gotten me through them. And I was like, you know what? And honestly, what choice do you have in a moment like that other than trusting God, who has promised to never leave you or forsake you?
Right.
And promised to be faithful. So how do you do it? You don't do it. You let him do it. And you choose to believe in a God that you know is faithful, whether you feel it or not.
When I am afraid, I will trust in you. What that's saying to me is we have to boss our feelings. We have to boss our feelings until they take root as faith in our heart.
Right. You know, 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. And I just recently noticed that verse, I always just say, take every thought captive. I tell my clients that a lot because a lot of mental health it's here. It's in our mind.
Right.
It's our thoughts and taking those thoughts captive. I just recently noticed that verse says, we take every thought captive. We make it obedient to Christ. I don't have to do it by myself. I don't have the power to do it by myself. But it's God and me together. We're a team. And He will help us focus on what's really true. What's really true in that moment was God had not left me. What was true was my life was going to be very different. And it was going to be hard.
And Harry had left you.
And Harry had left me.
But
And
God had
it
not.
was going to be hard for my girls. And it was going to be hard for me and our family and our friends. You know, it was going to be hard. That was true. That was part of the truth. But the other part of the truth, the big truth, the capital T truth is God was with us. He knew this was going to happen from the foundation of the world. God knew that on August 18th, 2013, Harry Stokes was going to make this choice. And that comforts me to know that God allowed it for some reason. I may not ever know fully, but I know that I'm a counselor now and I never would have been. So that's one way that God has used it, you know, for something good. Anyway, I think we have to just choose to trust. And, you know, sometimes I tell my clients, sometimes you have to choose it before you feel it. But I believe that God is so faithful that if we choose to trust, the feelings will come. He will bring the feelings. I tell husbands and wives that you're not going to always like your spouse.
Right.
But you choose to show love to that spouse. And if you're obedient and you choose to love your spouse, God restores the feelings.
He does.
He does. I can tell you that from 2 husbands.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yes. So the punctuation is Sherri has fallen in love and has married a wonderful, godly man, and they have blended their families together. And this is a whole new season
It's a
of
whole
life.
new season. I met
for
him at
you.
church, so all you single ladies, stay in church.
Exactly.
Yeah,
same
I met him
church.
at church. So, yeah.
Sherri, thank you for being my friend.
Thank you for inviting me.
For
Thank you for
doing-
being my friend.
Doing ministry with me. Just a little plug. I have shared with you all the journey that I went through to write my children's book. And I said I've got a friend who is illustrating it, and I have a friend who is going to help me with a counseling curriculum or a curriculum. We don't know exactly where God's going to take it, but this is the friend. So this is another opportunity that we have to do ministry together, and who knows what God has in store
right.
for us meeting all those years ago. But if you have any questions or any concerns about trusting God, please, and in anything that we've talked about today, be sure to email me, wendy@wendypope.org. And if there's anything that I can't answer, I'll reach out to Sherri and maybe she can help me understand things. I'm not an expert in anything, and
I'm not an expert in anything
you and I
either.
are just walking through this life leaning on the Lord, but we both do love the Lord, and we would do anything that we could to help you get to a place where that cultivating trust builds that bank of faith, and you prepare yourself for what comes. And fortunately, and God bless, sometimes those things don't come to people, and that's wonderful. But sometimes, and more times than not, they do, and we've got to have that. We've got to be prepared for it, and we get prepared for it by continuing to sow into our relationship with Jesus Christ, by studying His Word, but also being doers of the Word, not just hearers.
And I think saying yes to Him in the little things prepares you for saying yes
exactly
in the big things.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for joining us for our first 320 conversation. Next week we'll have another friend, and then the following week another friend. Y'all are getting to meet several of my friends, so I'm not going to say anything more about next week, but I'm super excited. Y'all take care. Okay. Awesome.
I hope